I'm curious, Justin, what would be the immediate impact of this new 15% tax that Trump announced yesterday?
You should just think about this as being season 2 of your favourite soap opera. We've just been through a year of tariffs being on and off and on and off, and the president never being able to decide. The Supreme Court says, well, actually, if you want to behave like that, you're going to have to go through Congress in the future. He says, well, I've got a few more things, and so I'm going to be on and off and on and off. So the most important thing is uncertainty, and this narrative, this soap opera, rather than a trade policy, remains very much with us. Folks at home, you're not going to see a price cut anytime soon. In fact, the president, we're now, by the way, on our 4th set of tariffs in a 25-hour period. So keep track of that, would you? But none of us are going to get lower prices as a result of this. And we don't know if there's going to be refunds, but I can tell you that if there are refunds, you and I aren't getting them either.
Okay. I love the soap opera analogy there. That means drama. So Shelby, White House Trade Representative Jamieson Greer says that the president used the emergency tariff law in the first place because he needed to act fast. Here's some of that.
He came in, he needed to move very quickly. He did. Trading partners came to the table right away. They opened their markets to us. We imposed tariffs. Now we're in a situation that we have these deals. We can reconstruct what we need. We can reconstruct our half of the deal.
Okay, so they needed to get in, do it fast, even though it was deemed illegal. But did they offer any explanation as to why Trump announced the new 10% tax Friday, only to ramp it up Saturday to 15%?
Well, I think the bottom line is because this new section, this section 122 that he's now using allows him to go up to 15%. And I think, you know, I was in the press briefing on Friday when the president came out and talked to us reporters. It was very clear he was not trying to hide his frustration here. And so he is also, when we're talking about tariffs, I think it's important to remember he has been a pro-tariff person for years, for many years. And so this is something that he has always kind of been intrigued by. And so he came into this second term really, you know, I think more aggressively wanting to implement these tariffs. And now that the Supreme Court has struck it down, he's saying, you know what, we're going to find another way to do it. Because ultimately what we've seen in this administration is the president is essentially doing exactly what he wants. And if he can't do it one way, he's going to try to find another way to do it. And he's going to do it to the best, to the highest of his ability. And so in this case, that is the 15% tariffs that he announced.
Joyce, you say it's shocking that 3 justices would even allow Trump to use the emergency statute. But Trump has been praising Justice Kavanaugh for outlining clearly in his dissent the laws that give Trump power to impose tariffs. Was that appropriate?
Well, this sort of exchange that the president is having with the Supreme Court is highly inappropriate, Alex, but I don't think we'll see that stop anytime soon. Trump has, of course, done this since his first term in office, praising justices when they rule for them and then canceling them out when they don't. So it's a very transactional relationship. You know, the reality here and the reality of Justice Kavanaugh's argument is that Congress holds the power to impose tariffs. But sometimes they lend a little bit of that to the president. And when they do it, they know how to do it. For instance, they use the word tariffs in the statute. They impose time limitations on how long they can last or a percentage on how high they can go. And the Supreme Court was only looking at one very specific law in this case, IEPA, which typically involves sort of international emergency economic powers. And this statute never says tariffs in the entire statute. And so the majority of the court said, look, Congress knows how to let the president impose tariffs when they want to. They didn't do that here. It's very unlikely that that came as a surprise to anybody in the White House. This is just a clean textual reading of the statute. So the idea that 3 justices were willing to climb on board to the White House's point of view, I think suggests just where many people in the conservative majority on this Supreme Court live.
Justin, Trump said last week that he won affordability, while recent polls show consumers concerned about rising groceries and other prices. The president is also likely to mention GDP numbers on Tuesday. The numbers show a slight decrease in real GDP in 2025 and slower growth in the economy, certainly in the last quarter of 2025. How do you expect him to use these numbers during the State of the Union? And more importantly, how should Americans view them?
Well, I think the real question on whether the president has won affordability is who are you going to trust? A guy who hasn't been in the grocery store in decades, or the receipt you see at the checkout? And I think people know exactly what's going on with prices. The thing that galls me at the current moment, and we're going to hear it again, when Trump goes to his rallies, he literally has pre-printed signs that say prices down. It's literally a lie. There are people, I mean, we all know it's a lie. There are people in his White House who are printing signs with lies for people to hold up because a lie is the best story that they've got to tell right now. Morally, I find lying disgusting. Economically, I think the answer here is very simple, which is he's losing on affordability. He always declares victory. I'm not going to give the man's words any credence, but the reality is utterly clear to every one of us who goes to the store.
Shelby, the Supreme Court's ruling suggests that Trump could have gone to Congress from day one, when he still had strong support, to pass tariff legislation. Why didn't the White House take that approach?
Well, somebody asked that actually on Friday, and he essentially said, I don't need to. He can do it himself. And it's really interesting because after this Supreme Court ruling, there were a number of Trump allies in Congress who said, let's do it through Congress. And the president still believes that there are alternate avenues to do it. And he thinks it would be easier than going through Congress effectively. Because remember also, this administration doesn't have huge wins in Congress, right? They don't have a ton of leeway. And so if there's one or two Republicans who are opposed to, for example, going through Congress to implement tariffs, he's probably not going to get that through. So it's easier for him to try to do it just through the White House versus trying to convince some of these more skeptical lawmakers that they should implement tariffs when they're hearing otherwise from their constituents at home.
So Joyce, what does the ruling mean for the separation of powers? And if Trump continues to ignore that separation, can't he just keep doing what he wants and wait for it to make its way through the courts? I mean, is this really a check on his power?
You know, it's a great question, Alex, because this is one of the rare moments where we've seen the Supreme Court tell the White House to pump the brakes. It's a very clear reminder to the White House that there is a division of power between the president and the Congress, and the Congress holds the power in this area. And it's very interesting that Shelby's talking about the possibility of going back to Congress to ask for greater authority to impose tariffs. Trump can use pre-existing authority, of course, and that limits him in terms of the percentage of tariffs he can impose, and perhaps more importantly, how long they can stay in place for. But a real feature of this landscape might be a Congress after the midterms, if there are Democratic majorities that would simply remove the powers that they've given to the president in this area and say, you've behaved irresponsibly, you've acted in a retaliatory fashion. Now, thank you very much, Mr. President. Congress is retaining its power for itself.
So, Shelby, Justin said that none of us on this panel should expect a refund anytime soon, right, with the tariff refund. But Trade Representative Greer echoed Trump today when he said that the White House will wait for the courts to outline whether and how refunds should be issued. Democrat Governor J.B. Pritzker sent Trump an $8.6 billion invoice. Is the White House getting any pushback on this from Republicans? I mean, why wouldn't they want to put money back in people's pockets right away? It is a midterm year.
Yeah, there's certainly questions from Republicans about what is going to happen with these tariff rebates that have been promised. And the administration is a little bit not giving a solid answer on it, right? The president on Friday basically said that this is going to take years to go through the courts, and who knows what's going to happen next. And so what seems like it's going to happen right now is the administration is not going to refund the money to the countries that have already paid the money. But what they're also seemingly not going to do is to start giving that money out to Americans, while presumably they're waiting for all of these court hearings to start ramping up. And so really, this money just might be in limbo for who knows how long.
All right, Justin and Shelby and Joyce, thank you all so much.